A bloody rampage this afternoon during a Bible study class in Hollygrove. Tonight, 3 children fight for their lives in a hospital as police piece together what happened. Patrick Evans reports.
My brother.
Okay. Okay, well, he's under arrest. Okay, we'll just step on the side.
That's my brother. What y'all don't understand is that he's sick. He got a problem.
Police arrested 33-year-old Leonard Banks this afternoon. The man, they say, went on a bloody rampage on Joliet Street.
There were at least 7 neighborhood kids inside of the home, the suspect's home, attending a Bible study, which we understand was a regular occurrence inside of this home. They had apparently broken for lunch or for intermission, had gone into the kitchen area where the suspect, who lives inside of the home, armed himself with a chef's knife and began to attack the children.
3 were severely injured and taken to Charity Hospital. Family members of the victims are trying to understand why. Why would someone do this? The suspect's sister may have the answer.
Instead of arresting him, bringing him to jail, y'all should bring him to the hospital. He's sick. He's a paranoid schizophrenic. He's sick.
If you need help, they'll bring him to the hospital, okay?
I'm telling you he's sick. You want papers? You want me to give them to you?
As of right now, we don't know what prompted his violent behavior. That still remains to be determined. However, according to his mother, he does have a history of psychological problems, and we don't know what prompted his behavior this afternoon.
The neighborhood now tries to piece together what happened and why, and the mystery makes some wonder if the violence will ever end.
It's upsetting, but I mean, it happens so much not in this neighborhood. You know, you just pray and trust God that it doesn't happen to you or any of your family members.
Patrick Evans, Eyewitness News, Night Watch.
Police have charged Leonard Banks with 3 counts of attempted murder.
That video that you just got through watching, that was my call. I was the arm that you saw closing the back door of the ambulance so that it would block the view of the cameras of the patient. That was about 10 years ago when I was working down in New Orleans. I thought I had gotten through all of it, and I will end this with telling you how I found out I hadn't gotten through it. It was our second call that day. It was a Sunday afternoon. We were dropping off a patient at one of the hospitals when the call came down. They issued it to another unit that was across town because they knew that we were in the hospital. We had finished enough of the call at the hospital to where we could leave. We just had a little paperwork and cleanup to do. So we got on the radio, told them that we would handle the call, and they gave it to us. It initially came out as a child stabbed. While we were rolling to the call, we got another call from our dispatcher telling us that it was now multiple victims, that the perpetrator was still on scene, and for us to wait for PD to show up before we went in. Me and my partner looked at each other and kind of talked about it a little bit, decided that, you know what, this was a stabbing. If we're going to go in regardless of whether or not PD was there. We weren't going to worry about somebody with a knife. If it had been a gun, it would have been a different story, but we made the decision ourselves that we were going to go in either way. As we got about 3 or 4 blocks from the call, we could see that the street was filled with people. There were conservatively probably at least a couple hundred people filling the street in front of the call. We weren't even able to get up to the address that we were given because there were so many people in the street. We stopped the unit when we saw a gentleman coming out carrying a little girl in his arms who had terry cloth towels wrapped around both forearms, and the towels were soaked through with blood. We got out of the unit, we opened up the back, put the child in, and started trying to assess the wounds on that child, cut off the towels so we could get a look at the wounds. It's hard to remember the exact timeline, but about that time, or in that area, somebody from the crowd told us that there was another child still in the house. So I told my partner that I would go check it out, find out what we had. I think both of us were assuming in our minds that the child we had in the back of the ambulance already was probably the worst one. Walked up the front stairs, entered the house, not realizing that this gentleman had stopped coming in. So I was by myself walking through the house back to the kitchen where this child was. As I walked through the kitchen door, the first thing that I saw was a pool of blood on the floor. As I got further into the room, I saw a 6-year-old boy laying face down on the pavement with his head turned to the side. And the look on his face was a look that it appeared that he had a dead look on his face. There was no expression. The eyes looked dead. And I froze for what seemed like a long time, but was probably just a split second. I noticed that I saw movement in the body telling me he was breathing. I kept moving in. The child at that point looked up at me and looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mister, am I going to die?" I didn't want to panic the child. I didn't know what was going to happen. I hadn't even checked him out yet, but I could see the stab wounds all over his back, the pool of blood that he was laying in. But they always tell you that you don't want to panic somebody in that situation. But then again, you don't want to lie to them either. So I ended up, just what I told him was, I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. I got down with the child, started trying to do an assessment on him. But since I had just jumped out of the back of our rig and come over there, I had no equipment with me. The only thing I had was a BP cuff and a stethoscope. His arms were too cut up to put a BP cuff on him. The legs were cut up, I couldn't put a BP cuff there. There was really nothing that I could do for this child. By the same token, I didn't feel that I could leave this child, because that would have panicked him even more. So I basically had to sit there with him with nothing that I can do. All this training that I'd had, and there's nothing I can do for this child. I got on my radio and tried to call my partner and let him know what was going on. Tried that 3-4 times. Wasn't able to, I don't know if he couldn't hear me or he wasn't getting a signal or what, but he never answered. About that time, dispatch came back on the radio, because they apparently were hearing me, and asked me what I needed. I told them what was going on. They said that they would respond a second unit to our location, because at this point we now had the patient that I was with, the patient that was brought out to us, and then there was one other patient. So they were responding a second unit. As soon as the second unit was dispatched, the paramedic from that unit called me on the radio to find out exactly what was needed and to let me know how far out they were and how long it'd be before they got there. At that point, I estimated that there were at least 20 to 30 stab wounds on the back side of the body alone. It seemed like it was an eternity sitting there with that child. Like I said, there was nothing I could do. I could just basically sit there and try and verbally comfort this child. However long it took for that second unit to get there, and I found out later that it was only about 4 or 5 minutes. That was the longest 4 or 5 minutes of my life. When they rolled up on scene, they radioed me as they were pulling up, find out what they needed. I gave them the list of equipment that needed to be brought in, and they came in, and then together, the three of us got this child stabilized and did what we needed to do medically to take care of him, and took him out and loaded him into the back of their unit. I then went back, got into my unit, checked with my partner, find out what their status was. We were ready to roll at that time. At this point, the media had already shown up, and there was a shot towards the end of that video that you watched where you see the ambulance coming right by the camera. That cameraman got very lucky because initially he was standing right in front of my unit when I started rolling. And it doesn't look like it's that close in the video, but I probably was within 3 or 4 inches of my mirror taking out his camera. Because I was just hell-bent on getting to the hospital with this kid. Took us about 3 to 4 minutes of transport time to get to Charity Hospital, which is the big county hospital in New Orleans. We rolled in there, took this child into the trauma room, and at that point I was basically done with my responsibilities, and the doctors took over. While I was outside in the hallway, the doctor came out to talk to the mother of this child and to tell her that he needed to take her son up to surgery for them to find out. The mother refused that at this point, citing religious reasons and didn't want blood transfusions. The doctor immediately turned to a police officer that was standing in the hall and had the officer place the child in protective custody so they could take him up to surgery. We finished up our paperwork and were sent back out on another call, which that was the norm in New Orleans, and as far as I know probably still is. They're just overworked there. We came back later, back into Charity Hospital, a couple hours later I think, and saw the doctor and asked about what the status of that child was. They found 80 stab wounds completely on that child. Fortunately, out of all that trauma, only 3 of them hit vital organs inside. A week later, that child walked out of the hospital physically fine. Myself, after that, it was at least a week before I was able to get a decent night's sleep. The first night or 2, I couldn't sleep at all. And it was probably 4 or 5 years before I wouldn't see that child in my head on just randomly. But I talked about it a lot. I talked to a lot of other EMTs and paramedics to tell them my story, one, to help me, and also that maybe they could learn from it. The only counseling I got was self-counseling. The city offered nothing, and they all knew what had happened and what I had been through. I had talked to dispatch. The dispatcher actually that had been on during that call was a friend of mine, and we had talked about it with her, because I had come up to her saying I felt like I was panicked when I was talking on the radio, and she came back and told me that no, I was under control and everything sounded very professional, which I can only assume came from just being well trained to handle that. But all those years, I never received any counseling of any type on it, except for, like I said, my self-counseling of trying to talk it out. I finally thought that I was over all of it. I thought I had gotten past it, and it still would, I'd think about it once in a while, and it, didn't really bother me too much, and I stopped telling the story. This past year, I started taking the CISM classes. And the instructor, Major Ebel, asked me if I would be willing to talk about this story. And I agreed. I said, yeah, I think it'd be good. And because some of the things that were in class had started bringing up some of the old feelings, so I thought it'd be a good time to talk it out again. Well, once I started telling the story, like I have here today, in front of the class, everything came back. All the old feelings, the emotions flooded back into me again. And I realized that I wasn't over it yet. I just buried it for all those years. So here I am 10 years after, and I won't say that it was as intense as it was initially, but it was definitely back. I left EMS. Well, I stopped working the streets within about 6 months and went into working back in the shop preparing the ambulances, and that I only did that for about another year. And then I decided it was time to get away from it altogether. As I used to jokingly tell people, I got to the point where I felt I had enough nightmares, and it was just time to get out. I know people that have done that job for 20, 30 years and have never had a problem. At that point, like I said, I had been doing it for about 9 or 10 years. And I was at the point where it was time to step down and step away. I knew that much, that I needed to get into something else. The advice that I would give would be, if you have a traumatic incident like this that you're involved with, or you see, or something that affects you, get help. Find somebody to talk to, find a professional. Use the disaster responders website. Use whatever tools you can find to get past it. Don't let it fester for years, because it doesn't get better. You can stuff it only so much, and it's going to come back. So you need to get it out when it happens, or as soon after it happens as you can. Try and, if you can, talk to, if you're with a EMS service, talk to your management. Find out what they can do. Push them to get some CISM training or counselors to help not only yourself but anybody in the company that has to deal with this. You need to get it out. You need to get it taken care of, because it's not only going to affect you, but it can also affect people around you. And you need to be thinking about all that. And you need to take care of yourself and those that you're with.